I went through college and medical school with this strict materialistic mindset that the physical world is all there is. And in one of my first weeks as a psychiatric intern, I was asked to see a patient who was in the emergency room with an apparent overdose. I was in the cafeteria having my dinner when this call came through, and being a green intern, I was startled by the beeper going off, and I dropped my fork and spilled some spaghetti sauce on my tie. So again, being a new intern, I didn't want to embarrass myself, so I put on a white lab coat and buttoned it up so nobody could see it. Then I went down to see the patient, and she was totally unconscious. I could not revive her. But there was her roommate who had brought her in, who was in another room about 50 yards down the hall. So I left the patient. There was a sitter there with her, as happens with all suicidal patients. And I went down to see the roommate. I spent about 20 minutes talking to the roommate, trying to understand what was going on with the patient, what stresses did she have, what drugs she might have taken for an overdose, and so forth. It was a very hot Virginia late summer night, and I was starting to sweat in that room. There's no air conditioning back in the 70s, so I unbuttoned my coat so I wouldn't sweat so much, inadvertently exposing the stain on my tie. When I finished talking to the roommate, I stood up to leave and then saw that it was open, so I quickly buttoned it up again, said goodbye, and sent her on her way. Then I went back to see the patient, and she was still unconscious. I confirmed with the sitter who was with her that she had not awakened at all during the time I was gone. She was admitted to the intensive care unit because she did have some cardiac instability because of the overdose. And when I saw her the next morning, when she had awakened, she was just barely awake. And I went into her room, and I said, "So-and-so, I'm Dr. Greyson from psychiatry." And she opened one eye and said, "I know who you are. I remember you from last night." And that just blew me away because I knew she was asleep at best and unconscious at worst. So I don't know how she could have known that. So I said to her, "Yeah, I'm surprised. I thought you were out cold when I saw you last night." Then she opened her eye again and said, "Not in my room. I saw you talking to Susan down the hall." That made no sense to me at all. She was lying there on the gurney. The only way she could have done that is if she had left her body and come down, and that made no sense. You are your body. How can you leave it? So I didn't know what to do. I thought, is she pulling my leg? What's going on here? She saw that I was confused, and then she started telling me about the conversation I had with her roommate, what questions I asked, what Susan's answers were, and then finally said, "And you had a red stain on your tie." That just blew me away. I didn't know what to make of this. I was really getting flustered at this point. I thought, were the nurses somehow colluding with her to trick this poor intern? But no one knew about the stain except the roommate. I realized that, I was having trouble keeping my composure then, but my job was to deal with her mental status, not mine. So I pushed things into the back and just dealt with her about what made you take the overdose, what are you thinking about suicide now, and so forth. And thought, well, I'll think about this other stuff later on. So she was admitted to the psychiatric unit, and I was a busy intern. I didn't have time to think about this stuff. I didn't dare tell anybody. They'd think I was crazy. So I pushed her on the side and just didn't think about it for a while. But it was very, very emotionally upsetting to me to think this bizarre thing happened, but it can't happen. It can't have happened. There must be some other answer to it. It just sat there in the back of my mind for about 5 years until I was now on the faculty at the University of Virginia, and we had a young intern join us, Raymond Moody, who wrote a book called Life After Life, in which he gave us the term near-death experiences and described what they were. I had never heard of this type of thing before. And when he described it to me, I realized that's what this patient was talking about. She was talking about, in a near-death situation, leaving her body, seeing things accurately from another location. And I thought, well, I need to understand this. So I started collecting cases, and it wasn't hard to do. These are very, very common phenomena, but nobody talks about them. But if you start asking patients who have been close to death, they will tell you about them. And here I am 50 years later, still trying to understand them.
Did you expect it was going to last 5 decades, or did you think this was going to be a short project of collecting case studies?
I assumed, Tim, that in a couple of years I'd have a simple physiological explanation for this, and that would make me satisfied and be the end of it. But the more I learned about them, the harder they seemed to understand. So I've gotten more comfortable with not knowing all the answers.